Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to our session on what not to do in Florence, in the Uffizi. Thank you for that story. But welcome to our session on how marketers can win in the evolving B2B go-to-market space with two very experienced B2B marketers, Catherine Torrance and Claire Pankhurst. Now, many moons ago, campaigns were planned in painstaking detail and finely crafted because we had one shot to get it right or the budget was blown. Well, technology and AI has enabled us to roll out campaigns much more quickly and simply. But have we traded quality for quantity? How do we get that balance right to ensure we have well-designed and executed campaigns, but keep the speed and agility to maximize on our results? Well, this is exactly what Catherine and Claire are going to be talking us through today, sharing processes and frameworks to deliver high-quality campaigns whilst keeping your teams motivated and engaged. But before we get started, it would be great if you could all introduce yourselves in chat, and I would love to know how you would rate your own campaigns, with 1 being pretty damn appalling and 5 being, yeah, sensational, knocking out of the park. And also, I just want to say thank you for sharing some of your campaign horror stories. We had everything from making some beautiful invites to a Formula One event and them accidentally being thrown in the bin, to sending out a global campaign in French, to quite a few on working with those extremely creative VCs and founders who seem to put ego first. I'm just looking at some of these scores. We've got a 2 and a 3 and 11, John. Oh, we might have to come back to you. Well, I'm going to hand over to Catherine and Claire, but we want to make this as interactive as possible. So please do share questions as we go, and we'll stop and answer those as and where relevant. So over to you, Catherine and Claire.
Thank you. So thanks everyone for joining. I think we have 21 people, or maybe a few AI note takers, but a really great turnout. So I'm really happy, and I think we've got a nice mix of sales folks and also marketing folks. And I think it's great to see how many sales people are really interested in getting under the skin of marketing. So what we wanted to do is take a quick look at the macro kind of environment, the state of GTM, because things are really in a flux and changing place. We also wanted to look at the campaign swirl and kind of dig into campaigns in particular.
Hey,
the pain it creates. Oops. So thank you. But the pain it creates, but also the opportunity that comes out of that. And I think a really core component is keeping teams motivated and avoiding overwhelm as we push them to deliver. I think probably a lot of people feel that their teams are working really hard, and marketers are, the ones I talk to anyway seem quite burdened, like there's a lot going on. So how do we keep people motivated? And then we'll look, and sort of the crux of this really is looking at the processes and frameworks that we think are really important to developing high quality campaigns that can be launched predictably. And then we have a calculation for, oops, I've let somebody in, and there we go. A quick calculation for the kind of opportunity cost of delayed campaigns. And then we want to set up aside time for us to have a discussion. Please, by all means, interrupt as we're going along, because I think it's really important to start talking about how do we win. As marketers, we really need to start winning more. And we think that's a really important component as well. So this is Claire's idea to put in, and I think it's really good. It's from Inside Out. It's anxiety. And I, for one, definitely am feeling this. I think for me, anyways, it brings to life the feelings of anxiety I have sometimes when I think about all the things we need to do with, in marketing and all the challenges we face as marketers. It can feel quite crazy and chaotic. And so I think we feel it, at least I know I feel it, and the numbers are starting to show it. So they're kind of, and this is a super whistle-stop tour, by no means in depth, but I think it encapsulates what we're seeing in the state of B2B GTM. There are kind of 3 buckets that we broke it down into. Overall, the tactics of the last 10 to 15 years no longer deliver like they used to. And I think, I personally have a question mark over whether they were even ever delivering, or whether it was just VC money and VC-backed companies marketing to each other, and that created an inflated sense of what was working and what was good marketing. So, we're all hearing growth at all costs isn't working. It's no longer affordable. It's not acceptable by boards. Buyers are inundated with poorly targeted and unclear solicitations from marketing, from BDRs, from anybody who can get their name. And then we've got this rise of outbound AI, which is great, but it also sets us up potentially just more noise in the market. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on there with the tactics that we're using. And I think we know as well, it's harder to engage buyers. And again, you can look at, the 6 Sense data, and other companies as well are talking about, 70, even 80% of the buyer journey is happening without seller involvement. And this is something, I was doing research maybe 2.5 years ago, and we were talking to buyers of cybersecurity software who, should be in market because there's so much going on. And this poor guy was saying, oh yeah, don't ever put a call the experts button or get in touch with an expert, then someone's going to call me back and I'm going to have to talk to a salesperson, and I really don't want that. So buyers are calling the shots, as we all know. And of course, it takes more touches to get people along the journey, even to that first conversation. And then, this is separate data, but from the kind of sales side, sales teams are struggling, reps aren't making quota, deals slipping, buyer groups are getting bigger. So this kind of whole world of pain in GTM. It's a really challenging time and a challenging environment. So my takeaway from this, and I think, with Claire, our takeaway is great marketing is more important than ever. Hold on. And I would say it's critical for business survival. And I'm just going to do a quick admittal here. There we go. Thanks. Welcome to you, those of you who are just joining. We're just kind of getting into the crux of the conversation. So I think it's, great marketing is really important. And then when we think about marketing, I kind of want to take a deep dive in and look at campaigns in particular, because I would argue they're at the core of marketing. A lot of the strategic work we do, that marketing teams do across all of the different marketing disciplines, in a lot of ways it goes unseen, and it's really the campaign where all of the hard work and all the good thinking manifests itself. It's the most visible aspect of our work. So when we're thinking about how do we, kind of change this dynamic, we think starting with campaigns is a really good place.
Catherine, can I just ask a quick question here? A really good one from Natasha. She said, my team is new to campaigns. They think campaigns are emails. So she's really curious how people go about defining what a campaign actually is for teams and organization stakeholders. And I thought this was a good time just to define that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think I'm going to admit, Bianca. So I think campaigns, an email is a component of a campaign, but I think, it's just one tactic in an overall bigger program of activities that you're doing against a certain objective. So you can have maybe one campaign that you run for a year that has different phases that go throughout a year. You could have multiple different campaigns on different subjects or toward different audiences. But I would say it's bigger than just an email, and it's bigger than an email to a landing page with a follow-up. It's a sort of multi-stage program is the way I would articulate a campaign. But the pain of getting out one good email can be almost as great, or feel almost as great, as the pain of putting out a multi-channel campaign. And if other people have different definitions, let's put it in the chat. I don't think that I've got the be-all end-all definition, but if I were to characterize it, that's the way I would do it. So one of the things, and again, if people see this or don't see this, let us know in the chat, or Nicola, please interrupt me. But I think oftentimes execution gets pushed down to junior team members, and sometimes as a CMO, you've got so much going on, you might not see everything that goes out the door, and it can feel a bit like whack-a-mole because there's so much that needs to be done, and if you are not on top of every little thing, maybe you've got the quality of campaign writing that's not there, or something else that's not up to standard. And so it's really hard to wrap your arms around all of the moving parts of the campaign. And the development process is really messy. So, here we are, the top line here, we've got, this really nice ideal of a campaign where you get the stakeholder input and, the salespeople who have a point of view are there at the beginning and they share everything that you know, and you get all these great insights and you're able to really wrap your head around this information and distill it down, and you have a great plan, and there's, what we would all like to have happen, and then there's a reality of this kind of crazy, massive chaos that happens. And it can be really painful and it can really burn teams out. And then, of course, the person with a really strong opinion comes in when you're about to go live, and maybe you have to go back to the drawing board. Or, teams are struggling to get the messaging to an acceptable place, and they go round and round in circles, and it takes a lot longer, and then you end up actually with a worse message going out than if you had just stuck with what you had in the first instance. And then from a CMO perspective, CMOs can't be on top of everything all the time. So either you're too distant from the campaign and things that aren't good enough go out, or you're too down in the weeds and then you're not paying attention to all the other things you need to be doing. And neither one of those are a recipe for success. And I think a big contributing factor of this kind of campaign pain and chaos is that there's no clear set of steps that people follow rigorously. I mean, those of you from agency backgrounds where there's a really kind of rigid process for getting campaigns out the door, you might be doing that. But in my, last years of experience in B2B companies, in-house, there doesn't always seem to be this repeatable process where you really can rely on high quality campaigns going out at a consistent cadence. And I'm just going to pause there and see if anyone has any questions. Anything popping up?
Just lots of helpful feedback as well. Simon's just said a B2B marketing campaign is all about connecting with other businesses to show them how your product and service can make their work easier and help them succeed. All you have to know is what their work is, what's stopping them succeeding, how your solution maps to that, and how to contact them in ways they want. It's nice and
all
simple.
You need to know. All that
yeah, that'll do.
So, of course, all of this campaign chaos, the swirl that often happens, has a business impact, right? So, costs can go up, time to market goes up, and then the frustration that the business feels and the team feels also goes up. And it can have a really negative impact. And then, of course, pipeline and revenue get impacted. So if your campaign is delayed, for example, and you go out even 2 weeks late, that can really have a knock-on impact on your month, on your quarter, and if it's if you're hitting at a crucial time of year on your year goals. So that's a big impact. Then you've got campaign quality, and I would argue with our focusing in on our target account lists and really looking at our best opportunity prospects, if we're putting out poor messaging to them and thinking, well, we can just test and kind of burn through all of these names on our list, we're actually doing real brand damage. And you might not notice it immediately, but for sure over time, people are going to wonder what in the world this company is on about. And so I think there's lasting negative impact there. And then, of course, business confidence in marketing, which I think we all feel is kind of shaky in some places, that goes down as well. So it's this kind of negative spiral. And of course, that's not what we want. So what do we do to improve things? And what if we could develop a process to hit it out of the park each time? And I think, revisiting this craft of the campaign, even if it seems something from yesteryears or Mad Men, it's a really good time to do that. Sorry, I'm just going to admit somebody here. There we go. And I think figuring out how to craft campaigns and how to do them predictably can be a real winner, because if you can get this core, this thing that everybody sees, into a really good place, it lifts everything else up. It can be both a company, a company morale booster and a business booster, because good campaigns can really put you on the map. And I'm not talking about Super Bowl ads or something that's really flashy. I'm talking about something that really resonates with your target audience, that clearly articulates what makes you uniquely appropriate to solve their problem. Whatever form that may take, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about great campaigns and all of the different tactics that you use to convey that message. So we've looked at, what that process might be, and we have some thoughts around it, and that's what Claire's going to talk us through. And we think that this is really going to help marketing teams get to market better and faster. So a focus on quality messaging, faster execution, and we want to share it with you now, but we also want to get your best practices and your feedback, because I think what we need to do is build a gold standard for B2B campaign development. And I think it'll go a long way toward motivating teams and stopping some of the overwhelm that we see and the burnout that we see in marketing teams, and help people get the best out of their effort and their budget. So just a quickie here, and I've got someone wants to join this call. I'm just gonna admit as we go. There we go. Sorry about that. So if we take a moment, we kind of pull back out, we look at overall campaign development. What I often see, and I don't know if other folks see this too, but Claire and I for sure are seeing this, that you kind of skip these, a lot of times these first two boxes are skipped, and we go straight to, okay, what's the copy, what are the visuals, and what are the channels that we're going to be using? And I think the great thing about technology of the last 10 or 15 years is that you can do a lot more, a lot faster. But more, faster, off message or off target messaging is not necessarily better marketing, and it's not going to get you closer to where you want to get to. And I think we've got a lot of great tacticians in our mid-level and junior teams, but they didn't maybe get that grounding in marketing messaging and in the craft of creating campaigns. So this initial bit, this deep dive into our ICPs, our personas, and getting that research and really getting under the skin of it and understanding it, learning it, and then sense making it. And I know we use sense making in the sales process, but sense making I think is really applicable here. It's rationalizing all that information you've been given and trying to figure out how you map it again to what your prospect needs to hear. And so honing down, distilling that key message, and then dramatizing it in the visuals, and then in the copy and visuals, and then amplifying it is the way we would argue that you need to go through each of these steps. And so it's important to kind of carve out time for that initial kind of two sets of boxes, so you're getting that great messaging. But it can't take weeks or months. It really needs to happen in a matter of days. And so I'm going to hand over now to Claire, who's going to take you through the process and how we think it could work.
Thank you, Catherine. So the first 2 points that I want to pick up on really from what Catherine shared so far, based on our observations, is that campaigns seem to be done differently every time. And if you find this, that there's the process that people go through, it might be new team members, it might be different ideas that come in at the last minute, but these changes lead to delays and like a rhythm interrupt to the business when campaigns are being developed. Was that a hand? Oh no, you're recording.
Sorry, I forgot to record. We'll get half of a video.
Okay. And secondly, there's no rigorous process to consistently produce those high quality campaigns. And this obviously affects people's confidence, the team's confidence, both in us as marketers and also their own confidence in producing campaigns. And their motivation can suffer as a result of that. So what we decided to do is just to pull together a very simple and effective process using the sprint methodology from Google Ventures that use that for product, developing products at speed. We looked at adapting that and pulling out our own insights and thoughts of working on campaigns for over 15, 20 years, if not more, and creating a way, an effective process that can support and coach team members and also provide that neutral party input for those difficult conversations. Because, when you're inside the team, it can be challenging sometimes to have conversations about the quality, and then it can sort of affect team morale as well. So this is a time-bound structure, as I've popped in the chat. We know that campaigns in general need to get out the door quickly. There can be delays caused, from different things, and that accountability to get the input from all of the senior colleagues can be difficult when it just feels like, oh, that's what marketing have got to do that campaign, and there's no sort of revenue team perspective over what campaigns can actually deliver to the business. So this process follows a 5-day sprint. There's a mnemonic in here just to help us all remember it. So day 1, we're looking at setting a goal. Day 2, we're looking at creating a plan. Day 3, we're looking at refining that copy and design, then moving into the iteration process. And in day 5, we're talking about nailing it so that you're ready to take off with a campaign and launch it at a time that suits you whenever it needs to be launched. So I'm just going to go into a bit more detail about what these days actually entail. So this is a process that, you know, Catherine and I could come into the business to work with your teams. So we just wanted to work through what would be done on each of the days on the activity side. So prior to the sprint, there would have obviously been some homework and some conversations, and a sprint champion would have been appointed as to supporting the process, whether that's the CMO, whether that's the marketing director, or somebody else within the team so that we can work directly with them. We would have collated a lot of the data and perhaps some retrospective insights from previous campaigns. That data would have been distilled, ready for our day 1 conversations. So we're going in readily available and up to date with kind of where we're at. But this isn't a done for you process. This is a done with you, so that actually what we're doing is supporting the team to, with the questions that we know, help to uncover those insights based on, you know, again, experience and working across multiple industries, multiple campaigns over that period of time. So the activities including interviewing the cross-functional and the senior stakeholders. This is an opportunity to connect the dots between the business and get the input from people, you know, who have got an interest in this, and also getting their buy-in around what the campaign goal could be, because ultimately that's our North Star. Everything kind of feeds up to the goal setting process. So we have to be aligned on that. This is an opportunity to get that buy-in, and then also to uncover the people who are passionate about this that could join us later on in the process of the 5-day sprint. So we've set our goal. Now we're moving into day 2. Day 2 is around the planning stage. So this is actually where we would map out that campaign plan. This is a core marketing team day. We would obviously have all of the inputs from the respective areas of the business, and we'd be looking at the customer insights, the sales, you know, insights, and the other things around that goal, and to help us then to go through and flesh out who the audience is, what the phases of this campaign are, what the key messages are, the channels, the offer, and also map out a realistic budget and forecast, so that everybody then is informed as to, okay, this campaign is looking to be delivered on this date to these people on these channels. It's going to cost us X, and this is what we expect the results to be. So this is where that learning, you know, the sense making that Catherine was talking about really happens, and this is quite often the area that's missed in that acceleration to get it out the door. So this is the deep focus. Creative brief also is developed in this stage for the copywriters and the design team. But if you haven't got copywriters and design team, that's something that we can pull in. We can also work with internal team members to upskill and support them. Then day 3, we're looking at refining those assets. So we may have had an idea, we might have had like the key messages, but everything now needs to sort of bubble down to actually what does that look like. So this is the creative team now come into play, where we're looking at their development, supporting the development of the hero assets, the punchy messaging that's going to deliver. And as a result of day 3, we would hope to then have the actual assets, the copy, and the full campaign plan mapped out, whether it's on Miro or Figma or Monday.com, you know, whatever it is that you're using or we think is the most appropriate tool to be able to deliver that overarching campaign plan and the assets, so they're all in one place, because that's another bugbear of mine. When things get created, they're all over the business, and also I don't know about you, but sometimes you'll get a message in and it'll be, oh, can you just have a look at this asset? And it's like, well, what's that got to do with what was the background? And, you know, if we're moving at speed in the business, we don't always have that full context of what's happening around that one asset that you need to sign off on. So this helps us to, again, to collate, to get everything all in one place. So day 4, let's move on to the iteration. So this is actually the opportunity for those people that showed up in day 1, the stakeholders, perhaps the sales team or perhaps the CMO might want to come in here. You can imagine if we're in, you know, an office, we'd have it printed out all across the wall. Everyone can walk around, provide their feedback, and we get that agreement in the room as to if they're happy with it, we're happy with the process, the key messages, everything. That's our chance to really sort of dig in and make sure we get that full approval. Then we're going to get to the point where we actually quality control check everything. So if we're building out that messaging, if we're looking at, you know, maybe there's a QR code or it's going off to a landing page design site, it's about ensuring that those quality checks are in. Oh,
You're back.
I think I got muted by somebody. Sorry, if you want me to shut up, I'm not going to be much longer. Yeah, the quality assurance is a key piece of that campaign. I think the QR code just sticks in my head because I don't know if you saw that Mattel sent out all of their all of the dolls for Wicked that the QR sent people off to a porn site. I mean, it's not ideal thing that you want your kids to be looking at. Shocking, I know, but that's the kind of importance of quality control in these processes. So once we've got to the point where we're happy that everything is ready, then we can obviously share that process so that you have everything you need ready for takeoff and launch. So really, as a result of this, and this is where I'd love to hear your thoughts, because, you know, this is our own distillation of all of the areas that we have spotted or identified where things go wrong. You know, that's why we wanted to start this off with your campaign horrors, but also from our own experience, it's like this process, if it was given that center stage just for a period of time and he's getting all that input, we're actually then almost building out your change management process and also your messaging trigger and approval from campaign, you know, the stakeholders across the business to be able to deliver success in a repeatable, structured fashion. People start to understand and believe in that process, and they believe that you have control over the campaign process. So we go from campaign anxiety to campaign confidence, where not only do we feel proud that we're publishing and sharing, you know, a campaign that is gonna hit the spot and it's got all of the buy-in from everybody else, but it also just gives them confidence in us. So that messaging rigor is something that Catherine's going to just touch on. This is just one of the frameworks that we would be looking at doing with the team members within this process to be able to nail the messaging.
Can I just ask, share a couple of questions that have popped up?
Yeah, sure.
And Catherine, you might be covering these as you go through your example. One from Helen, who said that she often finds that there's too much focus on performance, which is really pushed by the board and the leadership team. And so you don't get enough time on the brand strategy. And so any tips on how you can really encourage the business to understand the value of that? And Simon's just said, creative team creates hero asset on day 3. Curious what kind of assets are created in a day? Webinar, white paper, drip campaigns, live events, etc. all take time to develop, especially if they're multi-channel. Are you defining the campaign or executing the whole campaign in a week?
I think we're defining in a week, because that's a good point. I mean, you can't do, you know, a full webinar script, a discussion guide for, you know, for a panel and everything in one day. Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to overpromise that. I think what the process does is it allows you to be really structured. Really, anybody can follow this process. The idea is that there are probably a handful of assets that would go out in a first wave, the most important things that set the tone. So in the campaign planning phase, you could talk about what could webinar titles be, or what are the most important things we know from research that people really having questions about. So you could create the key points of the longer to create assets, but LinkedIn ads, email subject lines, most of the email body copy, a lot of the things where you can use maybe AI if you've got the technology that you're using to expand out multiple versions of something, that you could all do. So I think you could really make a dent in the asset development, but no, you couldn't do everything. I mean, if you had a complex multi-phase campaign, you're not going to create everything in a few days, but you can set out the intent for it. You can do pretty deep on that first phase, and then have the broad brush strokes and some really good solid stakes in the ground for the continuing phases, is what I would say. Do you have anything to add, Claire?
No, I think that that's a really valid point. And what we're looking to do is create that structure and the rigor behind those quality assurance checks as well, so that actually looking at the detail of checklisting what needs to be done in what order. So again, you're almost getting that structure to be able to develop and deliver within the time that we're together, or within that process.
So this is just kind of one example, and because we've been talking so much about messaging, I thought a messaging framework would be helpful. So this is completely made up. The kind of, I think it's a fake company. It's called High Five, and it's pre-COVID. So this was before we all had Zoom, and we became so amazing at video conferencing. But if you cast your mind back 7 or 8 years, video conferencing was a real pain in the neck, and there's always kind of one poor soul who's in the car and can't figure out how to dial in, or you can't get the video conferencing equipment in the big boardroom to work. So that's the kind of what this pretend business was trying to solve. And so we've made up a little scenario around it, just so you can get a sense of how you might work through messaging. So the scenario, and I can just look at it here actually, the scenario is that we need to create an ABM campaign to end users, and these end users are senior managers in mid-market companies managing local and remote teams. And their pain points are wasted time getting everyone to meetings, keeping up to date with team members, and then ensuring their control of everything. Because if you're the manager and your team's far flung and you don't know what they're up to, it doesn't look good for you. And so this is kind of a standard corporate messaging hierarchy. They've got their brand promise, they've got their positioning statement, elevator pitch, brand pillars. So, we're kind of assuming most companies will have got, at least some of this down well enough that they could start working from it. That's the assumption for this exercise. And so kind of step one of the campaign exercise would be to get into the prospect state of mind. And I really love this. It's very simple. It's what do they think now? And what do we want them to think? But I find that it's really powerful. And for those of you who have agency backgrounds, this is kind of from the old days of agency land. It's a really good, it's a good process to go through. So a lot of times, yes, you're welcome to have the slides. What it really helps you do is get into their mindset. So instead of saying, our prospects think that this and this and this, or they have a hard time getting on conference calls, it's much more about put yourself in their shoes and use first person. So it's a fact, it's hard to get in, we always have problems, there's always somebody who can't get on, it really is a time drag, we can't get through to all of our meeting agenda points. Whatever it is that's the problem that your customer is having, write it as if you're that customer, based on the research, based on everything that you've learned when you've done customer interviews or whatever it is. And then what do we want them to think now? You stay in that first person and you go through all of their pains and issues, and then you map that to the things that your company is uniquely able to solve for them. And that's a really good process, not for kind of making them other, but for bringing yourself into their shoes and thinking about the world through their eyes, or seeing the world through their eyes. And so after you've done that, which it should take a little while, if it takes you 15 minutes and you're not sweating a little bit, you haven't put enough effort into it. I'd say it's something that you really want to spend a good hour doing and making sure that you've really picked up on what's most important. And then the next step is to find the core of your idea. We've borrowed this from Made to Stick, which I think is a really good book and has lots of really useful tips. And in particular for developing a key message, I really like these 3 bullet points. So identify the most important message you want to communicate. Remove anything that's unnecessary, because at some point, and Natasha's saying I love Made to Stick, at some point you can say everything you want to say, but you can't say it all at the same time, and you can't say it all first. You have to pick the thing that's going to be most resonant, that's going to be most impactful. And I think as marketers, we know that, but it's really, really hard to kind of hold your nerve and put all of your eggs in that one basket with the one thing that you're going to be saying. It doesn't mean you can't ever say anything else again, but if you only have limited space, you can't say a million things. And so it's instilling that discipline and rigor. And then, being ruthless in your prioritization. And then I really like this idea of using the inverted pyramid. I find it works really well. So this is what journalists use. Instead of, setting everything up and then giving the punchline, you give the punchline first, and then you backtrack and you support the punchline. So how might this work with, if we were to do it across ABM, well, you could set yourself up, just a chart with for each of the stages. If you got the ABM software, each of the and the intent data, each of the stages, what the key message is for each stage. So what's the most important thing for your prospect to hear? What are the support points for each of those key messages? And what's the fulfillment or offer or thing that you're going to be giving them after they've done the action that you want them to take? And so again, this is, it's not necessarily that I've come up with the most amazing wording here, because this is a made up company, I don't know, but the assumption is if you're in the company and you've gone through all of this rigorous process, you'll know what are the most important things to call out. And I kind of make a note here that this key message came up with is quite long, but it doesn't all have to appear in the copy headline. And this is where I think having your copywriter and your designer work together, instead of kind of in a conveyor belt of, handing, every person does a component. I think having them work together on something where the copy and the visual are really benefiting and supporting each other, you can say a lot more and with an economy of words. And then just some ideas about, you might have, what your support points might be, so whatever that data is that's proof of what you're wanting to say. And then you could have, whatever content supports for each of the different stages. And then, an offer at an awareness stage could be, a webinar with a team psychologist talking about building connections and remote team dynamics for senior managers, for example. So it's just a kind of whistle-stop tour of how you might use a framework to, this messaging framework to improve or to fine-tune your campaign messaging and your key message. And I'm going to go back to figure out how to present something else. There we go. So that was our example for that. This is just super, super quick. The cost of delay. So we didn't come up with this kind of formula, but I think it's really nice. And again, it'll be in the deck, so you're welcome to use it if it's helpful. But I think one of the things that I've always really struggled with is when you're working with your team and it's like, oh, we're not going to do it this week. We've decided to push it to next week, and it's like, well, it can't push to next week. It's got to go out now, because if we're not hitting our deadline date to get our campaign out, then there's a knock-on effect on everything we're doing. So there's a lot of urgency around events because it's a date that comes and goes. But sometimes with really important campaigns, slipping a week, slipping 2 weeks, there's not that sense of like, uh-oh, this is a big problem. But when you put a number, a dollar or a pound figure to it, it's a big problem, because it's we're missing sales. So a campaign delay of 15 days could cost you 40,000 pounds. It could cost you being in front of the customer before your competition. So I think it's it's an important thing to keep in mind. And now that's enough of us kind of racing through all the thoughts that we wanted to share with you. And I would really love to get your thoughts, and I'm going to stop sharing so that I can look at the chat and see everybody. And I guess number one question is, does this resonate? Is what we're saying something that other people have experienced? Nobody, just us.
Question from Matt, or comment from Matt.
A question and a comment. I mean, just wanted to start by saying thank you very much for a really structured process, and something I've also kind of am familiar with and have done in my agency life previously. Apologies if I missed this, but I just wanted to ask how you build the squad, as it were, or who's in the squad. I think you talked a lot about stakeholder management, which I 100% agree with. But what sort of skills do you bring to the table? Who's sort of in the team for that 5-day sprint? And how do you assign roles and responsibilities? I'm a big believer that an idea can come from anywhere. I don't think necessarily good ideas come from anywhere. So people have to sort of play in position a little bit. So I just wondered how you've ended up making that work as you run this process for clients.
Yep. So it's a really good question. So I would say, obviously you need the CMO. You need whoever that campaign lead is. You probably need somebody from RevOps if it's a complicated campaign and how everything connects, or marketing ops, at least on the first day. You can decide, depending on your copy and design talent, if you want them involved in the first day, or if actually you distill it down and just give them the highlights so they have the context. And then I would think, or my recommendation is, from a sales perspective, or if you're doing a customer campaign and customer success is really important, bring in the loudest, most vocal participant, troublemaker, person with an opinion, so that person who really has a point of view and needs to have it heard, because they're going to say it at some point. So you might as well bring them into the process and have them be a part of it. But I think you need to be economical with the time. So I think you bring that person in first instance. You have some sort of an interview process where you can ask those key questions. And so, for your business, it might be different from somebody else's, but what are the key questions that are going to get out of them, that core information that you need to get? And then what are the things that they need to hear so they can say, yes, I'm on board with this. And then I would bring them back on day 4 to have them be part of the review process. Not because you want every single opinion, and at some point, somebody has to decide. And if you've read the sprint book, they have a decider role. So everybody gets a vote to a certain point, but then when it comes to decisions, and you don't want consensus necessarily, and you don't want to go around and round in circles. So there's the person, it could be the CEO, it could be the CMO, you decide that up front, and that person's the decider, and that's the direction they're going. And so everybody else needs to accept and move on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of that, it's getting people to play in position thing, as you said, which is really clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there was a question from Annette.
Yes, I guess for me there are two. One is depending on the size of the business or where they are in terms of their cycle, a lot of these materials may not exist. So actually having a kind of like pre-sprint prep package is probably going to be incredibly useful. Otherwise, the sprint is going to be completely wasted because there won't be anything concrete to actually work with. And 2, again, similarly, very depending on the type of business and how they operate. But I would assume that for large organizations, this is a very unusual setting of just getting, in 1 week, getting everything done, signed off, and ready to go. And I wonder whether there is some sort of prep work that needs to be done with key stakeholders so that they understand what this sprint means, so that they're geared towards being happy to make decisions this quickly, because it will be very unusual for them. For them, it will usually be kind of like something that takes weeks. They can marinate, can reflect, they can consult, go back and forth. Whereas now it's kind of like, okay, you just have to make decisions, done. So I think that's probably critical for the success of this.
I think those are fair points. So I would say if if a company, so an earlier stage company or a company that's maybe in transition doesn't have all of the kind of inputs, you're never going to be in a perfect world, but there's a minimum, you have to understand your target audience. You have to understand their pains, and you have to understand how you can solve them. So if you've got kind of core things, then you can move forward with a campaign. If you don't have any of that, I don't know, I wouldn't put media money behind, going to market with something that doesn't have that at least that kernel kind of baked properly. So it's a mixed metaphor, but it doesn't have that in a good position. And then I think for bigger organizations, I think, maybe 5 days is too fast for some organizations. Maybe they need 3 weeks because it's just too foreign. And I think that's 5 days, I think you can get a whole lot done, and you can break the back of a really good campaign in 5 days. But if your business needs a longer process because it's just not used to moving in that way, I think it's adaptable. So it's not about being rigid. It's about taking a structure that's supportive and using it in the way that works best for the business.
Katrina, you had a really nice insight as well on your big campaign idea. Would you be okay to share?
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, in the past, so I come from sort of campaigns from a consumer space, but it was just really interesting what you were saying, Catherine and Claire, because in the past, what we have done successfully there is we've started with the big campaign idea. So I'm going to give you a consumer example, but I worked on a campaign which was about positioning a particular retailer as the destination for Christmas, but that was across, it was a garden centre, right? So that was across everything Christmas, including gifting. So Christmas trees, Christmas gifting, Christmas food. And we knew from our trading stats that there are moments of certainty. People will absolutely buy trees here, they'll absolutely buy food here, but they'll gift the whole season. So the media plan was flighted or planned according to what media we believed the customers layer over. They're going to see us on TV, then they're going to get a direct mail, then they're going to get an email, and all of these things will trade Christmas trees this week, food this week, gifts across, etc., etc. So there was a campaign idea put to that, and then the studio team scamped up. They literally hand drew, this is what that campaign headline could look like if it was delivered on a direct mail. This is what it could look like if it was delivered on an email. This is what it could look like as a social post, or this is what it could look like. And we literally lay it out. Now, in those days, we laid it out on the table with all these little scamps. Nowadays, we put it on a virtual board, and we're able to say, oh, actually, that looks a bit off. Like the thread of that campaign is starting to get lost. Somebody's thrown in a random idea that doesn't actually land that well if I'm in the shoes of the customer. But we do all of that before we then sign it off and build it out. So there's no time wasted to building out expensive assets that we're never going to actually ultimately use. So that's how I've done it in the past. I just noticed somebody asked about channels and how you do this for channels.
Yeah.
And certainly that's how we've done it in the past. And then we've signed that off, and then those channel assets get built. And in effect, then they sit in a timing plan ready to activate. So yeah, that helps. That's how we've done it in the past, by combining the media journey with the big idea at the outset.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the channels where quite a lot of teams are now built out is that there's a real focus on that channel. You'll have a specialist or an expert on a channel, and that can be sometimes a bit of a disconnect, because what campaigns is an overarching, we're looking at the audience, that key message, and then connecting the channels, for the distribution, whichever one's going to be, and adapting that key message for the right channel. So I think a lot of time we lead with channels, we lead with tactics, and then that's where you need to flip it on its head and go, okay, starting from, yeah.
Do you know, Claire, I think that's a really important point, because I had a recent experience, so forgive me if my colleagues on the call, because they were the guilty offender. I had a recent experience, somebody also has mentioned it, I think, in the conversation where they planned through a really lovely campaign and it had a very specific creative route, but somewhere in the mix, there was a drive for a performance metric that came in left field. And in the mix, again, this is consumer space, in the mix, the direct mail campaign got sent out, but completely, it was one that was picked off the shelf that had been run like a few years ago. Oh, we've got one sitting, we'll just run this out. And it sort of made no sense of the campaign delivery. But when we talked to the team about that specialist was an offline specialist, when we asked them sort of why you threw that in the mix, their response was, well, I'm being really, really challenged right now on what my channel, because they were channel specific, what my channel is delivering, and actually I just need to land some bottom of the funnel sales. So I've pushed this DM out. So it suited them in their accountability and their individual KPI, but it really it threw a bit of a spanner in the works in terms of the campaign, because it made no sense in terms of everything else that was landing. Yeah.
And I think that kind of concept of, you know, if we're leading this initiative, then we have that to say, you know, we're almost empowering the team to slow down and take a step back to move faster. That's the principle behind it. And, you know, for salespeople in the room, you'll know yourself, if the targets are get more, fill the pipeline, and not focused on perhaps the quality or the conversion of those, you'll get your sales reps out there sort of generating loads of pipeline, but then not necessarily working that opportunity to close it. And it's a bit, you know, similar. I'm just trying to connect the dots between what we're trying to do here is ultimately drive impactful campaigns that generate revenue for the whole business.
Simon has
so I was just going to say, Simon's got a couple of questions. So Simon, do you want to come off mute and share?
Yeah, sure. You know, a lot of the campaign, I mean, great presentation, by the way, and actually slowing down to speed up, I think is exactly what we need to do with campaigning. Normally it's sort of ready, fire, aim. You know, we've already put the website live. Oh, that wasn't what we were supposed to say, you know. And I think it's because of what you said at the start. Things are so pressurized to generate leads today. Nobody has enough leads, deals are not closing, pipeline's not converting. So just do more, you know, instead. But ultimately, when we plan a really good campaign, it does come down to the tactics at some point. Where should we blast out a bunch of emails, which are really well done, but it's an email campaign? Is it webinar based? Is it? So we're just wondering what tactics you're seeing working within some really good campaigns that you've run, and then also given this sort of lead hungry environment, what would you feel comfortable committing to in terms of, you know, outcome and results, and in what sort of timescales?
really good questions. Shall I start, Claire, and then you?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm digesting.
So I think tactics, I've seen a broad array of different things working recently. So with one company I was working with, so I go in fractionally to different companies, so I get kind of maybe not 10 years of experience with the company, but I get these snapshots of lots of different companies. And it's really hard because sometimes something works really, really well. So we were doing with one company own events, you know, a big summit, lots of lunch and learns and other kind of smaller, more intimate events. And they had a really good fellowship with their customers, and they could also get prospects to come, and they were a real hit, and they worked very, very well. Tried similar with lower expectations, but tried similar with a different company where we were moving from one ICP focus or one persona within the ICP focus to another. It was a complete bomb. There just wasn't credibility with the new personas because they didn't know the business well enough. So we were a year ahead of where we should have been because we didn't do that job to make them aware of the company. So transferable, I mean, some tactics I think are transferable, but I really think it's specific to the environment you're in. You know, doing owned events when you don't have recognition within your business, you haven't done the work for thought leadership, nobody knows who you are, is really, really hard. On the other hand, you know, we had with this one company where the owned events weren't working, we had a really happy customer base, and we started sending emails with videos of what was upcoming with the product, kind of even just tiny little releases, but done in a nice way, and they were a total hit. Something that I wasn't convinced would actually work, but the customers were really interested because this is where they spent their entire day in this product. And for them, it was really interesting, compelling information. So sorry, I don't mean to have a sort of lame answer to a very specific question. But yeah, I've seen different things working and not working. Claire, I don't know if you had a point of view.
Yeah, and for me, it's like connecting it back to that campaign goal. Like, what is it you're trying to achieve? So, for example, I've just been working with a client around expanding into the US, and this is a partner-led motion. So, you know, the things that we've found really successful have been, you know, like either presentations within the team, but following up with the partner teams individually. But prior to that, so like almost pre the presentations, it's been connecting with the individuals and getting that buy-in, and then the campaign itself was built out from those insights, and then we were able to roll and repeat really quickly. So that in itself is mobilizing us without having to be feet on the ground, you know. So I think again, I hate to say it depends, and but it really does on the campaign goal, the industry, and what you're trying to achieve. And that's why I think the repeatable model is perfect, but there still has to be that agility to be able to adapt to what it is, but for you to understand the right questions to ask, and for the team to feel empowered that they've got that confidence to deliver.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, and so they were a minute to time. Just a parting thought on that one is that I never throw a tactic away. So just because something doesn't work, I kind of put it in my back pocket and I'll pull it back out again, because, you know, in a few months' time or a year's time, it could be, you know, DM. Nobody was doing DM, and I'm not suggesting we do DM and kind of throw it like a wrench into the middle of a campaign, but it can be really powerful. But it's, you know, it fell out of favor for many, many years. You wanted to know about the lead hungry environment and an example of the kind of results you think are reasonable to commit to. And that's really, really hard, because I think unless you have the data of the company, it's hard to know like how many leads should we expect. But I do think you need to commit to something, and hopefully there's, you know, RevOps or marketing ops team, and you've got the data so you can at least take you know, a best guess on what we think this campaign should deliver in terms of leads. And if leads are what the business needs, I don't think, you know, we can say, oh no, you know, we don't do leads. I think we need to do what the business needs. And that's part of the very beginning stage of you know, day one is, what are we trying to achieve? And if leads is what we need right now, then let's figure out the most effective way, you know, most cost effective and most process effective way to get them. So I don't think we, I don't think we say no to no leads. I think it's more of a, you know, we'll have to agree that this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to measure ourselves. And now we're, sorry, 2 minutes over because I talked too much. Anything from anyone? I mean, we're available, and I stopped sharing. I'll just do a quick 2-second share, because we're really keen, if anybody's interested in doing a sprint, to get some pilot sprinters. So if you're interested, let us know. And if you're interested in doing a kind of a 2-hour mini sprint to see what it might be like, we're absolutely happy to do that. And if you want the deck, and half a recording, because I forgot to hit record, Nicola kindly offered to send that out. And then obviously if you have questions or you want to know more about how the process works, just give us a ping, and we're really happy to share. And we want to hear from you as well. If you think
Thank you so much, Catherine and Claire. So what I'll do, because I'm conscious of time, is I'll make sure that we follow up either later on this afternoon or tomorrow morning with the recording, with the deck, and also details if you want to follow up with Catherine and Claire and continue on this very interesting conversation. That was super helpful. Really great to see some proper clarity on frameworks as well. And thank you to everyone that joined, because there were some great questions and insights from you all as well.
Thank you.
Simon, Valia.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Xavier.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.